And now it is time for the Patriot Church, hosted by Pastor John Vacchiano.
All right. Hey, good morning, everyone. Again, it is Wednesday, Patriot Church Radio Wednesday. Welcome, all you lovers of God, country, and family. We are so happy to have you tune in this morning. And we've got another great guest for you today, John Hearton, running for U.S. Congress, Congressional District 8. So you'll want to get to know him some more and just listen to his background and everything he's got to offer us here, us constituents here in Congressional District 8, which is all of Indian River County, Brevard County, and a little slice of Orange County as well. So before we begin, I want to give you another great history lesson. Some folks really liked the message Sunday from Patriot Church.
Yeah.
And so
awesome.
Again, it was a basis of our religious foundation. And again, I'm just watching this morning. I can't remember who just was talking about something. Oh, I know what it was. The state of Louisiana is trying to has put together legislature to have the Ten Commandments put back into our schools. And of course, when you go down, and it is really awesome, of course, because that's a part of our religious foundation, our Judeo-Christian values, our real tenets of faith, how that so affected our country and helped our country begin. Of course, I look down and I watch all the different comments that come down, and of course, you always hear the separation of church and state one, and we shouldn't be doing this, blah blah blah, and this and that, as if the Ten Commandments would injure somebody if they read them, right? It would somehow mess up their psyche. But of course, that's what the Supreme Court said back when when prayer was removed, and of course when the Ten Commandments were removed. That one of the judges, of course, back then you wouldn't think of it being a lefty liberal judge, but he certainly was, when he said that he didn't want children to be able to read those things because it would mess up their brain, which didn't make any sense to me, of course. But of course, look what we have today. We have cities who allow you to steal up to a certain amount of money. We have cities that don't prosecute women being beaten and raped and so forth. It's just absolutely mind-boggling. So again, if we don't get back to some of the basics of our foundation of how we began as a country, we're going to lose our country. Our country is going to cease to exist. And what I always say, without God, our country will certainly cease to exist. And I want to be celebrating in 2026, right? Absolutely. Our 250th anniversary. I want to be able to celebrate that. So this election coming up, of course, that you're involved in, John, our primaries here August 20th, and then our election coming up in November 6th, I believe is the date, right, for that?
November 5th.
5th, okay.
Yep.
Is very important. So let me read you a couple thoughts for some more history lesson again for you this morning. Again, this was a message from Patriot Church, our religious foundation, and it took a man named Charles Malik, who at the time he lived 1906 to 1987. He was Lebanon's ambassador to the United Nations, but he also became president of the 13th UN General Assembly in 1959. So he's not American. He's the ambassador to Lebanon. And then, of course, he became the president of the UN General Assembly, which is really interesting to me. But here's a quote he said. He said, "The good in the United States would never have come into being without the blessing and power of Jesus Christ. Whoever tries to conceive the American word without taking full account of the suffering and love and salvation of Christ is only dreaming. I know how embarrassing this matter is to politicians, to bureaucrats, to businessmen and cynics, but whatever these honored men think, the irrefutable truth is that the soul of America is, at its best and highest, Christian." Charles Malik. Just powerful. I mean, you just don't hear about this stuff because it doesn't fit the narrative of anti-God, anti-country, anti-family, anti-constitution, all the antis that we're battling in this day and age. So, hey, we've got to continue to fight the good fight. We can't give up. You've got to get engaged. This is it. I mean, if stick your head in the sand now or just let it float up in the clouds, we're in trouble. We the people, to stand up, speak the truth, as we say at Patriot Church, at the intersection of church and state, and don't allow our country to be taken from us. We've got to, as old Ben Franklin said, we've given you a republic if you can keep it. And so we've got to be able to keep that. And then, of course, for our prayer this morning, let me read a part of a prayer from the Reverend Matthias Burnett, who said, "Finally, ye, whose power it is to save or destroy our country, consider well the important trust which God has put into your hands. To God and posterity you are accountable for them. Let not your children have reason to curse you for giving up those rights and prostrating those institutions which our fathers delivered to us as a sacred palladium, and which by the blessing of God have been peculiarly beneficial in the order, peace, and prosperity of this state." So again, I don't want my kids to curse me when I'm going to say, hey, Dad, Nano, they call me, Grandpa, Nano didn't fight for me. They're going to know that I laid it all out on the line, and I know you're the same way. So God bless you. Definitely. John Hearton, thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Give us some updates on how the run for Congress is going, and what's been going on.
Well, very busy time right now. We're pretty much in 2 to 3 events a day and running around the country. Brevard, of course, is a very long country, so my Ford Expedition has seen more miles on it, I think, in the last year than it has probably in the last 2 years, prior 2 years before it. But you had brought up a good point. I believe that we have to look back at our founding documents in order to be able to move forward. Sure. And I refer to myself as the anti-establishment candidate and choice. But the reason for that is because the establishment as it exists has forgotten a lot of our founding documents. They've forgotten about God. They've forgotten about religious freedoms. They've forgotten about our core beliefs and what makes sense for the country moving forward.
Right. That's great. Yeah, so that's important to remember that. And it's not only, it's obvious from many in the far left, of course, that what's been done, the removal of God over the course of decades in our school systems, in our ivory towers at our Ivy League schools and so forth, the craziness that's going on there. So you, of course, your constituents are here, Congressional District 8. As a congressman, what are some things that you think you really want to put into practice as you're moving forward?
Well, I do think we need to go ahead and take a look at a few things, and some of them are being touched on, but they're not being implemented. For example, we've got current concerns. Today, as you say, they're deliberating on Trump's future. Truth of the matter is, in accordance with Amendment 4, there has already been overdue or overreaching from the government as far as excessive fees and so forth that have impacted our former president and hopefully next president. So I think that Congress has been derelict in their duty in order to try and bring this to a little bit of a close. We all know that this is a political prosecution that is doing everything in their power to try and keep Trump in check. Mm-hmm. And the same goes for our J6 prisoners, political prisoners that are there. They have done nothing, essentially, to get them out. Some of them still remain in jail that haven't even been charged yet. Yeah. So that needs to change as well. Now, on just the day-to-day front, we've talked about term limits, and that's a need. There are fresh perspectives and fresh ideas from many people that are out there, and those are things that I think should be considered. It is a constitutional amendment, but and so is a balanced budget. Mm-hmm. We need to go ahead and address a balanced budget and get that squared away to prevent that excessive spending that the federal government is doing. I think probably the easiest way to address a number of those issues is for the states' rights. You've got a situation where the states have never given the federal government enumerated powers for, let's say, Department of Education, for example. Right. So the Department of Education should not exist. It's unconstitutional. There are a number of departments that are up there in the United States that fall into the same category. If those are efficiently much more effectively, it gets it closer to the voters as well, to where they can have decisions that positively impact our kids, for example, instead of negatively impacting our kids from up on high. we've got a long road to go. I mean, there's a lot of battles that are up there that we have to face, but we've got to do it one step at a time. I've seen too many people up there, regardless of party, that pretty much serve their masters, which is usually special interest.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, my person who's running against me falls into that category, being a lobbyist and so forth. His primary goal is in special interest. So we've got to bring this stuff back to we the people. We've got to try and make sure that we're focused on what is happening, not just in our districts, but throughout the entire country, and listen to the people and have accountability, not just for us as individuals or us as representatives, but also other representatives that may not actually be in our district. So for example, I'm the type of person that would wreak havoc on somebody in another state even that isn't doing the right thing. Sending out mailers to their constituents to make sure that they're educated on what their representative is doing. And I think that's important. We need to actually make sure that we have a unified front on approaching this and remember who we work for. Yeah. So
it's a trying time, to say the least. You mentioned, I think we mentioned it last week too, the 10th Amendment is what we're referring to. Again, for those of you have already heard this a million times, but some of you may be new this morning. Again, you have the Declaration of Independence, which I call the heartbeat of our country. It lays out those foundational truths, and then of course you have the Constitution, which I talk about it being the application of those truths and that foundation. And in there, of course, the Declaration, of course, mentions the 27 grievances that we the people had back in the day with a tyrannical king. And of course, each one of those grievances are held back in check with our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and so forth. So one of those thoughts there is the 10th Amendment, which basically it's just a simple sentence here, and it speaks. It's so powerful, and it would be so important for each state governor to be reminded of this, of course, in their legislature, that the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So again, like you're talking about, a lot of these alphabet groups, things that we have are not given power by the Constitution. So that those powers should be brought back to the state level, so we, the people of the state, can decide what they want best for their state.
Exactly.
That's what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And there's been so many situations where there's been overreach by the government, but we have examples within our Constitution and amendments that have provide an example where we, the people, have actually been able to go ahead and overcome some of that overreach. And part of it was the 18th Amendment, two of the least amendments talked about, quite frankly, the 18th Amendment, where the prohibition was provided back to provided for the federal government, and then the 21st Amendment, when we, the people, took it back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and that's a big point we learned, of course, in our Constitutional Live class about those. And there are some other amendments that have taken place over the years that have become that are really unconstitutional. The one in particular that really upsets me, of course, is the 17th Amendment, which was passed during the days of Woodrow Wilson. And this changed the whole dynamic, the whole foundation of the Constitution. And that, again, is stated so clearly by the Founding Fathers, by the law folk of the day, Blackstone and so forth, that if that amendment changes the foundation of the Constitution, it in essence is unconstitutional. So what happened on April 8th, 1913, the whole way that senators were brought into their positions was changed. We didn't used to vote on senators.
Right.
They were chosen by the state legislatures, because that made it a better connection between the state and the federal government, so they would have a better opportunity to really be a part of that, as opposed to now when we have these millions, billion maybe, millions for sure, Senate races that have been some of the most expensive Senate races you've seen just recently in the last couple of cycles, where now the people are electing senators as opposed to their state legislators appointing those senators, and it's a huge scar. I mean, just a major mark on what the Constitution stood for.
It's a big shift, and actually, that it brings to mind in some cases election integrity. When you sit there and you think about the corruption that's happened in our government, you take a look at what the annualized salaries are, and you think for somebody that's working 6 years and getting paid $180,000 a year, that they're going to spend $20 million on a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
The question comes to mind is, who are you working for?
Right.
If you're spending $20 million on a campaign, it's one of two things. You're either working for somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
special interest, or you are in a situation where you're looking to be corrupt yourself. And so I think there's limitations even of individual contribution from a candidate that should go in, mainly because of the fact that you kind of get an idea of who the person is.
Yeah.
It's I put a limit on my own investment, mainly because of the fact that perception is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And once you go over a certain amount, there's no getting it back. There's no guarantee that you're getting it back, and and quite frankly, $150,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so if you invest that into a job again that's paying you $170,000 a year, that's more than what your annualized salary is. And you got 2 years on that. So
Right.
The math's not tough. It's not a winning proposition by any means.
Mm-hmm.
And so but for me, I look at it as an investment in our future. Kids, 3 kids, 4
Yep.
grandkids. We've got to protect our freedoms for our future generations. We've got to be
Absolutely.
able to help support them and give them the same opportunity that you and I had growing up.
Yep.
So
And that was the prayer from,
Yeah.
of course, Reverend Matthias Burnett, so that we would be able to pass on those great truths and the great God-given rights that our founders were given. They want to make sure it passes on.
Absolutely.
Some of your great pillars that you have in your campaign, you've already mentioned the balanced budget, term limits, standalone bills, stop the flow of illegal migrants and drugs across our southern border, defend our God-given and constitutionally protected rights, protect our country with a strong military, support our veterans. Again, that sounds like common sense things that, of course, a businessman, as you have been for many years, would think of. It's not just an idea of okay, do I need to take care of my special interest groups? Because if
Right.
and for the little bit of time that I've been involved in the swamp, I say, boy, you can see that from the local level all the way up to the state level for
You
me.
can.
And so give the folks some background on your your business background as well.
Okay. Well, I started out with a company called Allied Signal, who bought Honeywell and changed their name to Honeywell. The president at the time was a guy by the name of Larry Bossidy. He was a protege of Jack Welch's, who was a firm believer of political correctness being the biggest waste of time. And I happen to agree with him because if I'm just telling you something that you want to hear, nothing's getting done. So I started out there as an engineer and took over some programs. Program manager, was one of the youngest directors in history, and served on their leadership council up there at corporate. When I left there, I actually started my own company with a couple of friends of mine, and we grew it from scratch, from basically zero up to about 750 employees at our peak. We had some very interesting programs that we were responsible for. I was the first engineer on the Defense Research and Engineering Network, which is all the DoD supercomputers. We were essentially defending from any kind of cyber attacks and so forth on for systems that were helping to develop tools and information for our next generation warfighter. So it was a very interesting time of mine, and growing, you learn a few things along the way. And one of those things is kind of giving up your baby. So we had developed essentially a help desk at one time to early on for communication security efforts. And starting that out from basically zero to to about 12 folks that were working it at the time, I came across an opportunity where I had to essentially get somebody else in to help run that in order for me to grow and in order for us to have other opportunities. So I did that. It was a difficult time, but somewhat refreshing. Yeah, you realize that giving up things can be very refreshing. Or
Right.
giving of time, giving of any kind of charitable things can be quite frankly refreshing and so forth. And allow yourself to grow both
Sure.
from an individual standpoint and a spiritual standpoint too.
Yeah.
So anyway, we moved forward with that for a number of years. I had very big success in growing the Defense Research and Engineering Network from 16 locations to about 359. During that time, developed the only collaborative agreement between DEA and the Department of Defense with a memorandum of agreement, which allowed the DEA to transport evidentiary data from the southern border back to where they could process the data for prosecution. So the video and so forth for the license plate reader program and data analysis, allowing them to track some of the drug cartel types to be able to prosecute them.
Right.
A lot of that data flowed through the infrastructure that we had set up to help support DOD. In addition, we had set up something called the Hawaiian Internet Consortium. Me and a guy by the name of Roger Johnson, and he's unfortunately passed since a couple years ago. He was a good friend and colleague, quite frankly, customer of mine for a long time. And Roger and I set up what was called the Hawaiian Internet Consortium. It was a collaborative effort between Department of Defense, USGS, which does the early warning tsunami system, and the University of Hawaii and others out there in Hawaii, connecting the islands together. And fortunately, unfortunately, I should say, a circuit, just one single T3 circuit, which is 45 megabits per second in terms of transmission, was about $1.5 million a month. And we built an OC-12 sonnet ring around the islands and put 2 diverse paths back to the United States, which meant that there was not going to be any severability in communications. And it was at 622 megabits per second for about $1.5 million a year. So under the collaboration between organizations, we were able to provide considerable cost savings to the taxpayer of over $16 million per year for 20 years.
Yeah.
Which was definitely a nice shot in the arm. And during my time there, we also had run across, there was a bid for the backbone of the network.
Right.
That was going on, and Global Crossing was a big contender for that. And in fact, they were the front runner after technical evaluation. Right at that point, they had overbuilt their network and were running into cash flow problems, financial problems, and wound up filing for Chapter 11 protection. And a couple of months later, I had learned that the Chinese Communist Party, under the name of Hutchison Whampoa, was trying to make a acquisition of critical U.S. assets there, Maine and Global Crossing. And so I had the opportunity to put together a brief and brief Senator Stevens and his staff, who was at the time the head of the Defense Appropriations Committee. And we had a good talk with the folks and the staff and provided pretty good detail up to it, including the fact that they owned ports at either end of the Panama Canal. So if you can well imagine, if they were being patient and listening on the network, seeing where the traffic is coming from, finding out where the larger traffic use of the network was happening, and about 90% of all internet traffic was touching their routers, so they could measure the transmission of a lot of different networks that would be there or tied together. It would be a bad situation for them to have ownership in that network and potentially shut down the Panama Canal with them owning the other ports. Right. And then deciding to have a war with the United States. If they'd done that and knew our critical communication areas and were able to shut those down, shut down the Panama Canal, it would be very difficult to get support over into the Pacific to help out our military. Sure. And in any kind of battle that might arise. So I'm proud to say that we were instrumental in making sure that U.S. critical assets were not sold to China. And we continued on, and the first sale of my first company was in 2009. I stayed on as the chief technologist to the acquiring company, which was Secure Mission Solutions. We had bought another company that was doing some physical security elements called SimG, and stuck around with them until we sold that company to Parsons in 2014. And after that, I took over a company called Mandex. It was having trouble and kind of on a downward slide, and was fortunate enough to work with some folks that I knew and made some things happen, and we tripled it in size. They made the Washington Business Journal Fast 50, first time in their 38-year history, and the Inc. 5000 for 2 years in a row. So I am familiar with turning things around as well, as you could say. So hopefully I can help turn some of this country's woes around as well.
Well, that's certainly what we the people have been talking about. So not only, and we've seen what happens when we can get good businessmen and women involved in politics, because they bring a whole different perspective, to what's going on there. We used to have lots of times, depending on the year, it was interesting. You look back, some of our generals became presidents and so forth, and then of course there was this movement of, well, you basically can only be an attorney, so you'd go to school to become an attorney to get into politics, and that was kind of a trend for quite a while.
Right.
And we saw a lot of the negativity from that, because I found out that some of these students coming out of law school never even read the Constitution. So it's just horrible to think that. So not only do you have business knowledge, but you have this in-depth knowledge of certain products that really tie in wonderfully to what's going on in the government. And of course, your experience seems great as well. So
thank you.
That's exciting to see that. So so you're talking about give us some example. I know this has been a big thing too. The standalone bills. We forever have seen these conglomeration
omnibus, minibus bills.
Minibus. I mean,
however many buses they can fit.
Oh man, it just does not seem like very much common sense.
It's not. And the truth of the matter is, if the bill can stand on its own, then it's not only good for the area. Let's take, for example, we've got a environmental issue currently with our lagoons here. It's not great for the people that live here, and obviously it's not great for the country. So developing a bill that can help support our lagoons, clean it up, find new innovative ways to actually solve the problem and not just treat the symptoms. That's the real goal. You don't want to take that pharmaceutical approach where you're just nabbing at symptoms and you're never really getting rid of the problem. So I think that there are some things that we can do on that front to help out, and I think that the federal government can help participate in that. So it's not just good for Florida, it's good for the country. So that is an example of a standalone bill that, quite frankly, is not hard to sell, I wouldn't think. And I'm sure there are others that are there. But when you're burying pork in so many of these omnibus, minibus bills, it's not good for any of us. It causes problems, and the government, federal government has, and I don't care which side you're on, the federal government has been an example of what not to do when it comes to fiscal responsibility. My question to any of our congressmen or anybody else that's out there is, what has our Congress done, not to do something, but to prevent something from happening? And so why are we $34.5 trillion? What has Congress done to prevent us being in debt like that? What has Congress done to prevent us having this border that's out of control? What has Congress done to help prevent us having these drug issues that are out there? What has Congress done that has to stop any of this woke agenda that's causing problems in our schools? And, we can go on and on about those kinds of things, but the truth of the matter is the answer is nothing. It's nothing for a variety of reasons. One is because they're distracted by money and whatever else that's there, but special interest is I think, one of the biggest cruxes that we have.
And that's been some glimmer of hope of some of the states like Florida, Louisiana, South Dakota, others, who have really just stood on the fact of that, wait a minute, we have a 10th Amendment right. We're going to go ahead and do things that are common sense, that our people, we the people of our states want. We've passed some great legislation here in Florida and elsewhere. There's been great legislation, and you see places like New York, California, New Jersey do the complete opposite. It's got to be a point where, regardless of how much power the lamestream media has over people. There's got to be a point in someone's psyche that just says, look, this just doesn't make sense anymore.
Well, it goes back to that situation where not in my backyard. And that's what happened with January 6th. When you look back and you see the Antifa and BLM activities that happened in Minneapolis, Portland, and Seattle.
The summer of love things.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, right. And the destruction and the issues that had happened in those cities were passed over. But when it happened in their backyard, or when they were sitting there saying, "Oh, this is an insurrection," this is, you know, they want to call that a peaceful. The other three a peaceful protest. Mm-hmm. This is a garden party in January 6th.
Right.
I mean, you can't compare the two. They didn't come in with guns ablazing. They didn't come in with things. They came in to speak their voice and were met with guns ablazing, especially Ashley Babbitt, who, quite frankly, was murdered, in my opinion.
Yes.
And anyway, I think that a lot of times until it happens in their backyard, they think it's not a big issue. And same goes for what you're talking about. So there's these other efforts that are out there until these people that are focused on special interests, or the special interests themselves, or the media, until something happens in their backyard, they'll pay no attention to it, and it'll be somebody else's problem. Or it'll be, oh, well, it's not true. It's fake news or whatever.
Yeah, right.
When they're the fake news.
Of course, the other obvious that you point out is, closing the border, securing the border. Of course, the flow of fentanyl. We've had folks come on the show that have been to the border, that are involved in what the drug issues are here. We've had all this great folks that have come on the show. It's been awesome to see. And it just goes back to that common sense term.
Yeah, we have to. We not only have to close the border down, we've got to get rid of a lot of the folks that are probably in this country looking to do this country harm. And quite frankly, the only candidate that's running for president that's willing to do that and stand up and do something is Donald Trump. And I've been a supporter of his for a long time. I think that his business sense that he brought into the office was something that helped the country be prosperous.
Absolutely.
And if not for COVID, which I'd say the jury's still out about who's to blame for that. They call it the China virus, but at the same time, the United States has dirty hands on that stuff too, because they helped develop the Wuhan labs and were instrumental in some of the activities that went on. And it's a shame to sit there and think that you would have folks within your own country wanting to do it.
Yeah, but again, we've been warned of this time.
Right.
President Lincoln and others have said, if our country is going to be destroyed, it's going to be destroyed from within, not from an outside source.
Right.
And this is what's taken place, whether it's been the trying to have other countries, in particular tyrannical countries, communist countries, try to buy up major businesses and land grabs in our country, or those who have some far left ideals in our country are buying millions and millions of acres of land in our country. It goes against what we were founded on, and you have, of course, defend our God-given and constitutionally protected rights. In that message I was sharing, I just want to give the folks a couple of real quick quotes. We went through Sunday and just looked at the first 7 presidents of the United States. Each one of them had a wonderful quote with, of course, I could share many more. But when you have the founding father of your country say, it's impossible to rightly govern the world without God and the Bible. I mean, how do you come against that? How do you say, well, George Washington was a great general. He was our founding father, elected twice, without, unanimously, could have served a third term, but, set a great precedent, of course, for the 2 terms for the presidency. How do you come against something like that? How do you say, well, look, it was good back then, but it's not good now? I mean, what do you say? How do we try to reach some folks who are just they've been so indoctrinated of this whole anti-God mantra, anti-constitution, anti-country? It's just absolutely, again, one of my favorite words, mind-boggling. It's just totally mind-boggling.
It is. I talk about how I have had a number of affirmations of items that have happened that not only encourage but push me in the direction that I'm going. And I thank God and give him all the credit for the efforts and the strength and so forth, because it's not an easy activity to do. And many people that don't realize this because they've either never run for office, which I hadn't done before, or haven't been attacked or had people try and talk you out of running. It becomes there's a period of time, I think, when you first dip your hat in the ring, dip your toe in the pool, however you want to say it, where you have doubts, where you have a situation you're thinking about, why am I doing this? Should I be doing this, and so forth. And in general why you're doing it, but there's nothing that's concrete that winds up being there's always that parachute, that ability to go ahead and parachute out and so forth. And I know I've told you this before, but when you get a tap basically in the middle of the night and you roll over and put in Ephesians in your phone and you read it the next day and you want to get a second opinion because of the second thoughts that are there, and you learn that it's a time to put on the full armor of God and march forward and do the battle. There's no turning back at that point. And you get to those situations where you really have continued confirmation. I was trying to pull something up, but you mentioned George Washington, and there was a text that I had with a couple that I'd met in Rockledge for the 100th year anniversary of the firefighters there. And I had mentioned that I'd actually there was a speech, or at least a comment that George Washington had a picture of him with his knee on the ground and his horse next to him. And beautiful passage. And I sent it to them saying, essentially, this is, I was thinking about using this in one of my speeches. It's something that this country needs so much now. And they sent back a picture of George Washington kneeling with his horse next to him. The words weren't there, but the picture was almost 100% the same. And it was hanging over their fireplace. Not something, I'd never met these people before. I still, to this day, don't have their names in my phone. I have a firefighters 100th year anniversary Rockledge in there. So, and it was, again, another affirmation that was, this is real. It's not something that God is saying, hey, if you want to do this, do this. It's him saying, keep continuing, march forward, push ahead, and say my truths. So,
well, that's our General Washington kneeling at Valley Forge, crying out, appealing to heaven for God to intervene on our behalf and win this battle. So there's just a different awakening. The church had always used to have been on the forefront of the battles, the tip of the spear kind of thing. Here's another example real quick. And this is you can go to all 13 original charters, constitutions of the colonies before we even became the United States. And you'd read a similar statement like this one here from the Rhode Island Charter of 1683. And there's what part of that says. We submit our person, lives, estates unto our Lord Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and to all those who perfect all those perfect and most absolute laws of his given us in his holy word. I mean, that was the norm. That wasn't some right-wing extremist movement. This is the foundation of our country. It was the mindset, the biblical worldview of those people who understood what it would take to come out of the bondage of tyranny. And we find ourselves today, John, in some more tyranny. What are some things that you can do as congressman to really implement that you're really thinking of day one you hit the ground running.
Well, we talked about some of the accountability, and I've always said to everybody that I want to be held accountable, and I also want to hold them accountable. So I'm not going to be an absentee congressman that doesn't listen to their constituents. I want to be out there and part of the community and hold regular town halls, not just when it's election time. And I say that mainly because when you look at it, 3 years ago, we weren't worried so much about the border because the border
Right.
wasn't as much of an issue, and yet today it's become a huge issue for us. So those are some of the things that we need to keep in mind that as we move forward in trying to do the work of the people, that the work of the people may change. They may have higher priorities and so forth. And so one is I want to make sure that there's accountability, not just for me, but for others in Congress too. And me telling you that somebody is not doing their job, there's not much that you can do about it.
Right.
But me encouraging and educating their constituents on what they're not doing and what needs to be changed, that's important. And I think that too many people are away from their government. They don't understand that it is a government that's supposed to be run of the people, by the people, for the people. And they need to be more involved. We need to have, this is not something that was in my plans. This isn't something that I was, at this time I'm going to go ahead and run for, no. I would much rather, I always said that I'd much rather be wealthy and obscure than rich and famous.
Yeah.
And I did okay for myself. I didn't have a problem. I don't need this job. It's not a situation where I felt that, it's going to be a big paycheck. I don't care about the money. It's something that is a need to serve and to turn some of these things around. Like most people, I was, got to the point to where you're throwing things at the TV. I'd gotten so bad. But we've got to get back to the scenario where people can trust their government. People can actually look forward to conversations with their politicians. People can actually respect and understand that their role in the government is an active role, not a passive role. And so getting folks involved is a high priority for me. I think it's going to be very important for us as a country moving forward and making sure that we protect our constitutional republic.
Yeah, that's great. So I met your wife. She's very lovely. She supports
I'm a lucky
you on
man.
this. You're a lucky
I'm a
man.
lucky man.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, she does. She's never been much into politics, and so, like I said, it was not part of my plan. It definitely wasn't part of her plan either. It wasn't a scenario where she was looking to rub elbows. I mean, she has her own life. I always tell people that it's better to want each other than to need each other. And she is very successful in her own rights, and she can take care of herself. But we both love each other. We both want each other, and it makes for a great relationship. And even when the politics comes along, she's very supportive. So she's actually, for those out there interested, she's actually helping coordinate the 4th of July for the parade in Melbourne, Florida. And if you'd like to come and be a part of it, we'd love to have you. So you can volunteer your time or just be a spectator. That'd be great.
Great. And if someone wanted to be a part of that, what's the easiest way to find out?
Probably just reach out to me, and I can get you in contact with her. So that would probably be the easiest way.
And your website again?
Is HeartonForCongress.com. That's HeartonFor Congress.com.
Okay. All right. Great.
So the quote that I was talking about earlier with George Washington says, "It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor."
Yeah, it is right. That's exactly true. It's just so powerful. If you would quit trying to, I don't know what the word is, but it's just this whole movement that's been for so many decades to remove God, to erase God. All my folks that listen regularly, they know that's a Marxist plan. Whether it was John Dewey and progressive education, or the whole movement of progressive Christianity, which has totally just wreaked havoc on the church, most recently, of course. Whether it's Karl Marx and his pillars communism there and Marxism. All of that is removal of God. Marx, of course, is quoted as he's going to remove God. He's going to defeat God. John Dewey said things like, religion is this crutch. We don't need that. So again, these are all people who are totally the opposite of what our country was birthed on, the founding of our country. And it brings us back to a point. The day of reckoning is this, folks. You have a choice, as the Reverend Burnson said. We have a choice and the power to save or destroy our country. And how you vote this primary season in August and how you vote in November is part of a way that you will save or destroy our country. If you understand that we do need some big changes here, we need some new folks involved that really love our country, that love God and love their family, then you've got to make those tough choices. You've got to step out, and you've got to step out in faith, like you said, putting on the whole armor of God. And we've got to press on and fight this good fight. Again, the whole idea being remembered of our revolutionary time, the great motto that sprung across the colonies came out of Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, stand fast in the liberty by which Christ has made us free. Again, so if all of our faith, all of our foundation, all of our liberty, all of our freedoms come from God, and without Him, we have no freedoms, we have no liberty, we have no country. We cannot call ourselves America without God. It's one nation under God. So for our last few minutes we have together, why do folks need to vote for you? What's the big deal? What makes you different than the others that have been running, and what makes you different from some of the candidates we've even seen or the congressmen we've seen in other states?
Okay. I'm happy to say that there's a number of people that are standing up for we the people,
Mm-hmm.
that are standing up for our constitutional values, that are standing up for our God-given freedoms, and are wanting to put and keep us as one nation under God. And it's not a situation where that employs kind of discrimination or anything else. Our founding documents had nothing about sex or religion, or nothing about sex, nothing about creed, nothing about race. And to this day, they still are applicable to every citizen in the United States. And we need to protect those documents. We need to protect, they're not just pieces of paper. Mm-hmm. They are something that the country was founded on, those principles. And so we need to maintain those. So looking back in order to move forward is a big thing. I also, you say what separates me? Mm-hmm. Well, my biggest competitor is a gentleman who was 12-year lobbyist. Before that, he was in charge of the Florida State Senate, I believe. And there's some marred history. So I'd encourage people to do their own research and so forth and find out who really is running for their favor, who's running for their benefit, who wants us to be one nation under God and we the people. That said, I think we have enough lobbyists in D.C. And my biggest competitor is lobbyists, like I say, for the last 12 years. You can pretty much put an equal sign and special interest mm-hmm. on the end of that. And we've got to get out of this concept and idea of special interest. We've got to get some of these things back to where, and you had mentioned the 17th Amendment with regards to the senators. Honestly, that should be pushed back to the way it was. I think that the state there wouldn't be so much money and so much corruption
that's for sure
put in there, and things would be better. I think we ought to move to stop the corruption of elections by saying things like, if you can't vote, you can't donate. So get rid of some of these special interest groups, the PACs and so forth, that are throwing money and buying the politicians.
Right.
So it would be interesting to see, for example, I knew that he had raised about $1.5 million, I think it was, for a Senate run, for a U.S. Senate run, which at the time, I believe, was more than anybody else had. Mm-hmm. And then he dropped out of that Senate run. Well, there's $1.5 million, I believe, he held on to. And, what was it spent towards since in the last 12 years or so. My guess is he's used it to help fund some campaigns. And I'm not bought and paid for like Trump. I was pretty successful myself, and I can't be bought. So I think that's, I've never been in a circle of that kind of situation where it causes problems. So yeah, I don't know how to do backroom deals. I don't know how to get rich off of insider trading and that kind of stuff. I'm looking to try and do this because our kids, our grandkids, our future generations need to have our country that is sound.
Yeah.
One that will provide them the freedoms and the opportunities that we enjoy.
Great. Well, let me leave you guys with a God and country thought as we go this morning. Reverend Charles Finney, Second Great Awakening, said this about those of you and us in the church. Church must take right ground in regard to politics. Politics are part of a religion in a country as this, and Christians must do their duty to their country as part of their duty to God, and God will bless or curse this nation according to the course Christians take in politics. So that's where the church has got to be awakened and not be woke. Of course, we've got to engage. Don't buy into the lies and the fears of all the fear mongering that many try to put upon you by not getting involved in politics. And then lastly, Dr. Benjamin Rush speaks on the word, gives us a great definition of patriotism. He says, patriotism is as much a virtue as justice and is as necessary for the support of societies as natural affection is for the support of families. The amor patriae, the love of country, is both a moral and a religious duty. It comprehends not only the love of our neighbors, but of millions of our fellow creatures, not only of the present, but of future, what you just mentioned, future generations. That's why we're doing what we're doing. It's not for us. It's for our future generations. So thank you for being here again this morning with us. We're so thankful for you and your precious family. You keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
And
yes,
God
sir.
bless you, my brother.
Absolutely. God
We'll
bless
see
you.
you guys next time. Thank you all for tuning in this morning again. And remember, get involved, get engaged. It's HeartonForCongress.com. Get on the site there, HeartonForCongress.com.
And most importantly, vote August 20th. It's
August
less than
20th.
90 days away, and make sure you find the person that matches your values.
Yep, that's it. So God bless you guys. Thanks for tuning in. We will see